and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. Today, we'll explore Central High School. The school, which opened in 1910, educated a roster of famous students, including football legends Ernie and Bud Grant, author Gordon MacQuarrie, photographer Esther Bubley, and America's Ace of Aces, Major Dick Bong. The building itself made history in 1928 when it became the summer White House for President Calvin Coolidge. Despite a grassroots effort to save the historic building, it was torn down in 2004. Helping us dive into the story today is local historian Teddy Meronek. Hello, Teddy.
Hi, Maria.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm glad to be back.
So, the architect of Central is not who we would have expected. Back in the day, there was a kind of a famous architect who was doing all the buildings.
Right.
And he didn't get the contract.
He didn't get the contract. No, he didn't.
Tell me about that.
Well, they put it out for bid or to submit drawings for the building, and there were 5 architects who they picked their designs to think about. And what the school board wanted was a 2-story building with a basement that would cost about $200,000. Well, people submitted their plans for it, and the first thing they did was disregard and take out of the competition Carl Worth's design for the building, because he had the audacity to say that a 2-story building is never going to work because there's just going to be too many students. And he designed a 3-story building with a basement. And they disregarded it because they said, well, that's way too many stairs for the students to climb up and down. But they promised the architect who won the competition that he got, 1.5% of the total cost of the building. And it turned out to be Earl Barber. And his design, his 2-story building, won the competition. Well, fast forward ahead a couple years, and it turns out that they figured that, well, maybe a 2-story building wasn't going to work after all. Barber changed his to make it 3-story plus a basement. And I can't imagine what Carl Worth thought, but he loses to Earl Barber. But Barber had turned out to be a fairly important architect in Superior. He designed the federal courthouse, the old post office as we know it, and also Hammond Avenue Presbyterian Church. So there's a couple of his buildings still standing in Superior. So they got together and decided this is it, and they started the process of building what would be, they said, Superior High School, which met with a little consternation by the people of East End, who had their own high school, Nelson Dewey, out there, and they weren't happy about Superior High School as a name because it would make people think there were no other schools in Superior.
Okay. So it became Central High School.
It took a while.
Did it start as Superior High School?
It started as Superior High School, and you'll see old photographs of football players and that they have an S on their jerseys, and it's for Superior High School. And it wasn't until East was built in 1924 that it was finally declared that it would be Central. They started to refer to it early as Central, but they would go back and forth between Superior and Central because it was centrally located, they said.
Oh, okay.
That's why they built it in the first place, because it was centrally located. I don't know the center of what. It's a long way from East End and from South Superior. But that's what the argument they used, that it was centrally located.
At the time, there was Nelson Dewey High School in the East End. So where did the students come from? What other schools had they been attending before they came to Superior/Central?
Well, the only place they'd gone to high school was Blaine. If people know where the old City County complex is on Hammond Avenue, that was the site of the original Blaine High School. And that went from kindergarten, I believe, until 12th grade. But the thing people don't realize is that a lot of people never made it to high school. They were lucky to get an 8th grade education at that time, they thought. And Superior was, when they were using Blaine as a high school, Superior was a lot smaller. In 1890, the population was about 11,000. By 1900, it was 31,000 in those 10 years.
That's a huge jump.
And then it jumped to 40,000 in 1910, the year Central was opened. And not only that, the school population had grown, and people attending high school, their numbers had grown too. So they just couldn't fit them all in Blaine and Dewey, And the cutoff for students of whether you would go to the high school located in East End or the high school that was centrally located was, at the time they called it K Avenue. All of the avenues in the Central Park area had letters of the alphabet, and that was 5th Avenue East. So that was the cutoff point of whether you would go to Central or an East End school.
Okay. How much did it cost to construct Central?
$300,000, and that was, people think that's the whole school, but $300,000 was for the beginnings, you know, the first half of the school, where the classrooms were. In the 1920s. Andrew Webster, who owned the Webster Chair Factory, he donated money to build an addition onto the school, which would house like the industrial arts and the secretarial classes. And they had a print shop there. They printed the yearbooks. They printed report cards there.
Wow.
They printed play programs, anything the school needed. The kids were learning how to run a press, and they were printing them there.
Sort of like the Votech part of
Right. And then they added another addition in the 1930s of a gym. They had a gym in the original school, but it wasn't big enough. So they added another addition in the 30s, which is one of the nicest stories about Central. Of course, it was during the Depression. And the school board made sure that it was a local contractor who was going to build it.
Okay.
The people who were hired were from Superior. Out-of-town contractors would pay their men 25 cents an hour. They demanded that it be 50 cents an hour for these guys. All the steel that was used in the building was made at the Superior Shipbuilding Company. It cost them a bit more, but it helped the people in Superior.
Right. They were supporting the local economy while building this.
Yeah, it was a gym, a library, and a lunchroom that they added on. So their lunchroom, when the school first opened, I thought this was so funny. They printed what they were serving in an article in the newspaper. They printed what they were serving in the cafeteria, and you could get a bread and butter sandwich for $1 cent.
Oh,
I think dollar, yeah.
That would be a lot.
And then you could get, this I thought was funny, you could get tomato soup for 4 cents, but you could get a ham sandwich for 2 cents. And I thought, I wonder why their tomato soup was so expensive. And they served things like oyster stew.
What?
I think of high school kids nowadays, if you serve them oyster stew. Yeah.
There was no like casserole or hot dish?
I didn't see any. A lot of sandwiches.
Okay.
You know, so.
And they didn't have a lunch program back then or anything?
They had, well, you know, they had a woman who was in charge of the lunchroom, I suppose, an assistant, and they made all this food from scratch, I'm sure.
Oyster stew.
At
Central High School.
I don't know. I didn't hear any reviews or anything or read any reviews about that, so I don't know how it went over, but.
That's interesting.
It's an interesting school. And then most people, if they remember Central High School, the one thing they remember about it, even if they've never gone in the school, was the statue that stood out front of James J. Hill, you know, who was the president of the Great Northern Railway.
Yes, called the Empire Builder.
The Empire Builder. And apparently there's another statue, the same one, the bust out in Seattle or somewhere out in Washington, you know, because that's where the Great Northern ran. The people on the railroad paid for the statue or the bust because it was sort of suggested and encouraged that they donate one day's pay to the collection of money that they were raising to do this monument to Hill in front of Central High School.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now that monument is at the railroad station.
Yeah, BNSF, I think, yeah. It was moved in 2003. It was moved before the school was torn down.
Okay.
So it's out there.
Right. From its opening, how many students, was it used fully right away? Did they need all that space right away, or did it gradually grow? What was the population like?
I think I read that the student population during the first year that they were open was 600, which isn't a huge amount. But of course, every year it increased because the population was increasing here and more kids were going to high school. And I think Webster donated that money because he wanted kids to have the chance to go into these other, you know, it's like not everybody's going to grow up and be a college professor or whatever, but, you know, these kids can be taught, I don't know, something that they can use after they graduate from high school. You know, if they learn printing, if they're in the industrial arts, if you take stenography, you can go and be a secretary. And apparently the secretarial courses were very important because when Central opened up, they started teaching them right away, even though they didn't have this wing, the Webster addition to the school. They started teaching typewriting, which they hadn't taught before in high school.
Oh, so it's a brand new class?
Brand new thing,
Central?
yes. And when they opened Central too, they also must have been interested in the arts because they had a kiln and they were very big into pottery making.
Really?
Yeah. I was surprised to find that out, that there would be that much emphasis on the arts, but I suppose there was. And the other interesting thing I found out about it, I have this little booklet that's sort of a student handbook for I think it's 1924 or 25, and how many women teachers there were, but in subjects that are usually thought of as not being something that women would teach. They had a couple math teachers that were women and science teachers. And usually those were male-dominated subjects that would be taught by men. At least when I was in high school, I never had a female math teacher or a female science teacher. They were all roles that were filled by men.
Right.
But the staff, there were a lot of females on the staff at that time. Yeah.
And one was so influential that she caused a strike, as I understand.
Oh, Lulu Dickinson. Yes. Yeah. That was.
When did she teach?
Oh, she was there I believe when Central opened, and she taught well into the 40s, maybe the 50s even. I don't remember.
And she was an English teacher?
She was an English teacher who influenced a lot of people, including J.W. Beecroft. And it all started when a new superintendent came to town, and he sort of liked the new ways. You know, he wasn't interested in how things had always been done, and Lulu didn't agree with him. And she was not hesitant about speaking out, even to her classes, about what was going on. And it seems one of her pet peeves was that he would have things printed up, and they would be printed up on the finest paper, very expensive, while she was struggling with, wanting new textbooks, and they weren't forthcoming. So he fired her. And that's what set off the storm, and the kids went out on strike, the students. All
of the students?
Most of them at Central, yes. And then they somehow talked the kids at East. They didn't really probably care about, and at Cathedral, they probably didn't really care about the strike, but hey, whatever. And they wouldn't go back, and the parents got involved, and they were just adamant that this was the wrong thing to do. And it took the rest of the school year to really settle it.
Were kids going to school during that time?
Sometimes they'd come back and then they'd go out again. And there were, like on the street, there would be people having rallies, and there were public meetings that people would go to. And when I was first researching this, I thought, oh, you go, Lulu. This is great. I'm glad this is happening. But then you kind of stand back and you look at it and you think, maybe cooler minds should have entered into this, because then the Board of Education got into it and they got kicked out, and they weren't going to give up their power. I mean, it was just one bad thing after another. But it did change how Superior chose its Board of Education, because they had been appointed by the mayor.
Oh.
But then it was decided that it was going to be the public who was going to choose these people to serve on their school board. So that was the one good thing that came out of this. But I look back at it now and I think, why didn't you people just sit down and talk about this, like grown-ups? Because you weren't acting like grown-ups, any of you. Lulu, she stayed out of it. She testified once at some hearing, but I think it really damaged her, physically and mentally, emotionally. But the rest of them, I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way. And I can say the only person that I can not fault at all during this whole thing was the principal of Central, Mr. Wade, Clifford Wade. He was the only one who knew what the important thing was, and it was to educate those kids and get them graduated in June. And nobody else seemed to be thinking about that. And he even got fired, I think he got fired by the superintendent or the board or something. But people should not forget this man. He was an iconic figure. I think he cared about his students more than he cared about anything else in his life. In fact, he died at his desk at Central. He was there on a weekend, I think, trying to catch up with work, because he had been building a platform for the graduation ceremony that was going to happen the next week, and they found him. He died of a heart attack in his office.
Oh my goodness. Was that before or after the whole strike?
That was in the 1930s, so it was after the strike. And he had 25 honorary pallbearers at his funeral, which was held at Central. And all the kids stood they stood guard over his coffin when the visitation was going on, and they all came to the ceremony in their graduation gowns because he wouldn't be there for their graduation. It was the next week. It's very heartfelt. And then the best thing I found about it was that Gordon MacQuarrie, who had been a student at Central when Mr. Wade was principal, wrote the most heartfelt editorial about him. And, it wasn't attributed to MacQuarrie, but when you read it,
you can tell.
You know who wrote it, yeah.
Okay. The question I have is, did those students who were involved in that strike year, obviously the principal was trying to get them to graduate, were they able to?
Yes.
In June? Or
Yes.
did they have to go that summer?
They made it.
Okay.
But there were years later, they interviewed them,
Mm-hmm.
several of them who were still around years later, and asked them what they thought. And it's almost to the person they said, we shouldn't have done it.
Ooh, wow.
But are you saying that as an adult? But I always think, well, if it wasn't for kids, if it wasn't for teenagers and young adults, a lot of things wouldn't have happened, I think what they did was great, but maybe they're looking at it and going, God, we were kind of stupid, But that's what youth is for, to be stupid. They were passionate, and they were passionate about Lulu Dickinson. She was a greatly respected teacher, and they thought it was unfair, and it was what he had done to her by firing her.
Definitely.
Yeah. And she was in jeopardy of losing her retirement because of this.
Because she was fired instead of resigning her. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most people, when they think about Central High School, they're like, oh, it's the summer White House.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it become the summer White House, and why is that important in its history?
Well, as in most things in life, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Irving Lenroot had been a United States Senator from Superior. And when Warren Harding got the nomination to run for president, he was very interested in having Irving Lenroot as his running mate. Well, Lenroot hemmed and hawed about it for a while, and they passed by him and went to Calvin Coolidge because they thought, both Lenroot and Harding were United States senators. It might be better to find somebody who was, as Coolidge was the governor of Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he ended up being vice president and eventually president, because Warren Harding died in office. And so obviously all these people knew each other.
Right.
And Coolidge liked to fish. Irving Lenroot was from northern Wisconsin and also had a place on the Brule River.
Oh, that's just perfect coincidence.
Why not come to Superior for the summer? Because there's no air conditioning in Washington, D.C., but there's always air conditioning in Superior.
It's called Lake Superior.
It's called Lake Superior. So that's how it happened.
Oh, okay.
I think Coolidge had gone to the Dakotas the year before and spent the summer there fishing. So
he spent his days on the Brule River, but occasionally he would come into Superior. How often was he actually at the White House?
Like really not that often.
They had their own little room for him, right?
They had later on they called it the Coolidge room, but that was his office. I think it was the library of the school. And they even had china made. I don't think he ever ate a meal there, but they were going to be prepared.
Uh-huh.
He would come in occasionally, but he really didn't have to because they had strung telephone wire out to the Brule.
Okay.
So he would have, contact with the government back in Washington, D.C., and they had airplanes that came in all the time with mail for him. So
they land in Brule?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, but the mail planes came in.
The mail planes came in, so he really didn't have to come in town. But I suppose it was a PR thing, too, that you come into town and the press can take pictures of you. I swear Calvin Coolidge had his picture taken with everyone in Superior on the front steps of Central High School. There's these great panoramic shots of, you can see everybody, the nuns from the Catholic schools. Sometimes there's animals. I mean, they're wonderful.
My dog met Calvin
Coolidge.
I
know. And the thing you notice most is the lack of security, which you would never, that's not how presidents travel nowadays. So, everybody just stood on the steps with him and had their pictures taken. And then Herbert Hoover came that summer. And Coolidge, that was when he was in Superior when he gave Coolidge his support to run for president. Because he gave Hoover, his support to run for president because Coolidge wasn't going to run again. And so he backed Hoover, which may have been a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know, considering what Herbert Hoover had to face. So Yeah.
Okay.
We were
excellent.
the city of presidents
The city
that
of
summer.
presidents. And it wasn't just that summer the presidents showed up either, right? As I understand, a president-to-be also came to Central.
Right. I think that's one of the most interesting things that happened at Central was John Kennedy making an appearance in October of 1959, and that there were no photographers from the Telegram there to cover his visit at the school. They covered it during the day when he and Mrs. Kennedy were here, but I had been told that there were no photographers available because they were at the East High and Cathedral football game. And that was much more important, apparently. And it was at the time, because who knew John Kennedy? And really, in October of 59, as compared to what they, if he said October of 1960, everyone would have known him. So he spoke at Central that evening, and there were no still photographs of the event. But as I told you yesterday, I discovered that there was film footage of him speaking at Central High that evening. He and Mrs. Kennedy are on the stage of the auditorium.
Oh, wow.
And Mayor Lawrence Hagen, Mayor Bruce Hagen's father, introduced him.
Oh, wow.
And there he is speaking. And he wasn't the John Kennedy that you see a year or two later. He wasn't, he's not quite as, I don't know, comfortable as he was later on.
Okay.
I suppose it took a year of campaigning to get to that point where you were almost flawless in front of a crowd. But he did mention the football game that night.
He knew that he was being usurped.
Right. He said something like, well, I know that there's a football game going on. I saw it as we were coming into town or something. And then he said, and also there's television. Nobody would mention that nowadays, and he said, so I'm thankful to all of you who came out tonight to hear this speech, because there are other things that were obviously more interesting.
Yes.
So everyone should watch that.
Is it something that's
It's on YouTube? Yeah, it's on YouTube.
It's just a YouTube.
Yeah.
So it's like a public archive somewhere, or just?
I don't know who took it. There's got to be a lot of that stuff out there that, everybody had. I remember my brother had a movie camera in the 1950s, and he drove all of us crazy with it because you had to have these huge lights on it if you're indoors, and he would chase us around the house, and people were like being blinded by it. So everybody had one, and they were obviously inexpensive enough that anybody could afford one. So,
Right. And this wasn't news footage. This was just someone with a camera saying, hey, I'm going to take pictures of this guy just in case.
Yeah. Smart person, whoever it was. So
neat.
That was a find.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Central eventually became a middle school when Superior High School opened.
A junior high first.
A junior high.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it became the junior high first, and then it morphed into the middle school after
when they
that.
moved the ninth graders to the high school.
You got to blame that on the baby boom years, a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think they looked at the school population before they built the high school.
Really?
To see what, the projections were. Because, when I went there, it was 3 shifts. So your whole class was together for like an hour a day, maybe.
Wow.
Because everybody was coming and going all the time. Yeah.
Do you feel you got a good education?
I had some great teachers, but I think you lost a lot as far as being a part of a class and a part of a school by sometimes never seeing people that you'd been, going to junior high with, and grade school with. They were in different shifts.
That reminds me of when COVID hit, and my daughter, who was in middle school at the time, she went half the week, and half of her class went the other half the week. So they kind of lost each other for a while.
It was a big school. I mean, I think I had over 700 people in my class, I think, I mean, I went to a Catholic grade school. There's 6 people in my class. So, it's a shock.
The high school was
big. Big.
Now, you did not go to Central, right?
No.
Okay.
I was in Central exactly once in my life.
Only once?
Only once in my life.
When?
When we were in high school, the drama department, the orchestra got together and put on West Side Story.
Oh.
And of course, when I went to high school at Superior Senior High School, they didn't have an auditorium. They didn't have a stage. So the only place they could do this was at Central. And it was big enough for the production.
What did you play?
I didn't play anything.
Were you on the crew then? Or
we just went, yeah. My sister's wedding dress was in the play. but that was it.
Okay. And yet you were one of many supporters to try to save Central.
Right.
Why was Central torn down, and how did that process go?
I thought it was important to support it because, the Wisconsin Historical Society doesn't put up a marker in front of a building unless it's important. And there was one in front of Central, designating it as the Summer White House. And there was just something so iconic when you knew the history of it and you knew the people who had gone to school there. And you're thinking, what did they have in the water at Central? Why there's all these amazing people who came out of that school. And I also thought it was part of the great architecture on Belknap. Most people just probably drove by it every day, drive down Belknap, never think about it. But when you think about it, there's some of the best architecture in Superior. On Belknap, there was Central. Mm-hmm. There's the old courthouse. There's Hammond Avenue Presbyterian Church. There's the Masonic Lodge, which is now the Elks. And there's that great Belknap Electric Building, which was built as a duplex, back in the 1890s. Mm-hmm. And then you go down to Belknap and Tower and there's Globe News. And I thought, this is just a stupendous piece of, real estate here that has all these great buildings. And so to see Central go was really, really sad, And I look back at it now, it would have been a huge endeavor for anyone to take on that building because it was so big. And it was a struggle to see it go, because everything was coming down at that time. East came down, Pattison School, Barker Terrace, which was on John Avenue. It was just the sweetest little building. And I don't know why that disappeared. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard. And I suppose it's more sentimental if you've grown up in this town and these things have always been there. Mm-hmm. Of course, for years, I didn't know why that statue was in front of Central. I mean, I didn't go to Central. Nobody in my family went to Central. And you drive by it and you don't know who it is, but you recognize it.
And it's not like he went to Central or
right, or contribute. Yeah, I know. He's just there.
James J. Hill.
Yeah, but it was, that was Central High School. Yeah. And there's the whole Central East thing, too, that nobody can remember nowadays, the rivalry. I remember my siblings all graduated from East High School, and my sister-in-law went to Central, and my other brother-in-law, he's from out of town. But when there would be a Central and East game, on the radio, basketball, it was like those people were back in high school. Oh. The rivalry never ended. Mm-hmm. It was kind of funny to watch that because, I grew up in an era when there was one high school. Well, Cathedral was open, but it wasn't, the public school was only one high school.
Interesting. And you did mention there are many famous names that people, maybe locally famous or even nationally famous, who came from Central.
Right. I mean, we've got Bud Grant, Ernie Nevers. You're talking about people who are in halls of fame.
Right.
Ole Hogsrud. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't have been a telegram if it wasn't, for the Murphy family. And Morgan Murphy graduated from Central and also played on the same football team with Ernie Nevers. Esther Bubley. Mm-hmm. Esther Bubley and Ray Jones, two photographers that people probably, they're really not well known in Superior, but they were well known in other places. Ray Jones, I think he got 5 Academy Awards for still photography.
For still photography, when that was a category.
Yeah,
yes.
And he started out at Drysdale Perry in Superior. Mm-hmm. And Esther, I mean, she was an award-winning and a really important photojournalist of the 1940s for sure. And then
you have local favorites like Tony Jaworski.
Tony Jaworski, one of my favorite people.
He graduated from Central.
Yeah, he graduated from Central and he went and he taught at Central. So
a couple of years later, he came back.
Yep. And then there's people like the Hanich girl.
Right.
Yes.
That was interesting. Now, Teddy, you and Kathy Loxo have written a book, Central A to Z.
I know.
And I read that, and she is in there, a young lady who went to Central but never got a chance to become famous.
Right. She was one of those people who died during the pandemic, World War I pandemic. They called it at the time the Spanish flu. And her dad established a scholarship in her memory, which continues to this day at Superior High School. There's still a Hanich scholarship.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's Lou Martin went to Central High School.
He was my next door neighbor. Yeah, I loved Lou Martin. He was a wonderful
He was
man.
Like one of the 2 or 3 people left in his class. I remember they still had reunions.
They did. Yes, there were just 3 of them, and they got together and told stories.
Maury Arnovich, people don't remember him. He was baseball. Someone said he's probably the best baseball players not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. A great guy who came back to town and continued to work with local sports. And I just heard about this woman, which we didn't include in the book. You know, as time goes on, you're finding all these other people and you're starting to think, well, you know, really, what do they have in the water in that part of town? Why are there all these people? But her name was Corinne Kirkham. And she graduated. I read a story that said she did 4 years of study at Central in 3 years. But then I also heard that she graduated in 1918, which she would have done 4 years. I don't know what is true. Anyway, she went to Hollywood right after that, got into the movies, became kind of a star in silent movies for a short period of time. You know, she's making one movie after another. And the day her first movie opened up in Superior, Mr. Wade, the principal, let everybody out from school so they could go see the movie.
Oh, fun.
Cost 10 cents to see it.
Do you know what it was called?
No, I don't. I have to do more research on her because she's kind of interesting. Then she moved back here and moved to Gordon.
Gordon's a lovely spot.
You know, lived there for years.
Excellent. Well, maybe you'll have to have a sequel to Central A to Z.
Oh, I don't know. That was a lot of work.
Okay.
Yeah, but it just made me appreciate everything. Appreciate what teachers did. Appreciate what students did. Appreciated what Mr. Wade did. And they should never change the name of Wade Bowl.
Was that named after him?
That was named after Mr. Wade.
Oh.
Then I will protest again.
All right, you heard it here first. All right. Thanks, Teddy.
You're welcome, Maria.
And thank you for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.